Walkout Wednesday, protesting over pay, jobs and conditions. 500,000 workers across the country, including civil servants, university lecturers, train drivers and teachers.
Our children deserve better.
Absent from lessons, Huda Benamuda. She teaches programming, but says the difference between her wages and the cost of living doesn't compute.
It is difficult, the heating at winter and all of this. I cut my gym membership, and I'm just worried, what else do I have to do in the future if things keep getting that bad, really?
The government keeps saying that teachers are on average well paid.
The government has given a pay rise. Yeah, they've given a pay rise between 2.5% and 5%. That was not funded. That came out of school budget. That's children's money.
Resources-wise, we're stretched. It means that, when you were younger and you get to go on all those trips, or you had textbooks that you could take home, we just don't have those things anymore, and it's not fair.
I think they need to be realistic. They need to be realistic, don't they? The country can only afford so much, so they need to come to some compromise.
According to the law, only 6 official pickets are allowed on the line, but there's no limit to the number of supporters. And so the union says it's had to be strategic about where to send the most supporters to have the most impact. Here we're next to a really busy road, and there's been so far lots of support from the public. But how long can they rely on that support to continue?
I thought arts was your favourite subject.
Actually maths, but...
Roki and her sister Essie making the most of a day at home. Their dad, Ohi, is a finance manager and has had to take a day off during what is his busiest time of year.
I've had to let the team down and take the day off to look after the kids because they are not having any schooling today. And it's impacting me, my career, my team, but I think also importantly the kids.
And it's the impact on his kids that he worries about. The girls pride themselves on their attendance, but there could be more strike days to come this month. Despite your concerns about the girls' education, you still have sympathy for the teachers?
Absolutely, because the teachers go over and beyond what they should do every day. I know lots of teachers who use personal funds to purchase books for their schools because government funding is not sufficient anymore.
Actually, kind of happy to be at home.
You're happy to have a day off?
That's very cheeky of you.
The government described today's action as disruptive and disappointing. Data collected by the DFE suggests that around 10% of schools were fully closed in England. Of the rest, around half had to partially close.
It was built in 71, designed to last for 30 years. We've got leaks. We had about 13 leaks when we had the rain recently.
David Phillips has struggled with cuts to his secondary school budget over the last few years. Around a third of his teachers were on strike today, and so some students had to stay at home. What's it been like for you today logistically?
It's caused a lot of disruption, but I think we've all got to take the bigger picture in mind here. We've got students who are missing a day's learning, absolutely, and parents will be concerned about that. But what's education going to be like? What's the staffing going to be like? And what kind of provision is going to be like in 15, 20 years' time?
And those questions about the future of education are unlikely to be resolved anytime soon. Next week, we'll see another big set of strikes when thousands of NHS workers take action.
Well, earlier I caught up with the Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, and I asked her about the crucial issue of a lack of teachers. Your numbers are dramatically up on, people not going to the profession, aren't they? So before the pandemic, actually during the pandemic, in 2021, it was 65,000 vacancies. Now it's 101,000 vacancies. That's in just over a year. It's gone up by 40,000. You're just not being able to recruit the people you need, and once you've got them, to retain them.
Well, it's actually, it's not as simple as that. So you've got primary schools and secondary schools, and then you've got secondary schools by teachers and subjects. Primary schools, we pretty much meet our recruitment challenges. Secondary schools for some topics. So for some subjects, so I think in before the pandemic, I think for most, more than half of the topics, we were making sure that we were recruiting teachers.
But you're not going to be able to recruit those teachers and keep them if you don't pay them enough money, if you don't make their jobs worthwhile. And the complaints that we're hearing over and over again is that this is a profession that people want to do, they are passionate about, but it's not worth their financial while to do so.
Our teachers are doing a brilliant job. They're doing a brilliant job of helping our children catch up from the pandemic. That's why it's so disappointing, because obviously having a strike when our children have suffered so much, it's, you know, they still need to catch up.
But you could solve that strike by actually negotiating with the teachers, which you're not doing.
I am negotiating with the teacher. I have.
They're saying you're not negotiating, you're sitting down with them, but it's not a negotiation.
Well, what I've said to them is we will not be able to consider inflation or inflation-busting pay increases. It just would be the wrong thing. What we need to do is focus on halving inflation, getting inflation down.
By the time inflation has got down to acceptable levels, which, you know, who knows how long that will take, you know, you would have lost another 10, 20,000 teachers or so. People are leaving this profession. You can't afford to have teachers leave in such numbers.
Of course.
When you've got to educate, you know, the next generation of kids. I mean,
of course we do. Anybody knows that this is a people business, and it's much easier to retain people than to recruit lots of new people.
Is the strategy here to basically run the clock down to the exams? Because the longer you wait and the longer these strikes continue, you know, the closer we get to the exam period, GCSEs and A-levels, which is crucial for the kids, especially for pupils. Is that the strategy?
Absolutely not. And we've said we want exam cohorts to be prioritised to make sure that they're in school today. There's no strategy such as that. Our strategy is to halve inflation.
The main drivers of inflation are China and COVID, supply chain issues post-pandemic, the war in Russia and Ukraine.
Yep.
But those other international factors, we're constantly being told by the government that that's much more important for inflation than domestic matters. So when it comes to pay settlements, why is suddenly the domestic driver of inflation more important?
Wages are part of that as well. The others we're getting under control. So we've seen energy prices start to come down. But of course we need to make sure that we focus on inflation. And there are different factors of inflation. What we can't do is now have wages making a bigger contribution to inflation once we get those other things under control through energy and energy supply, etc.
There's a massive anti-bullying culture in schools. I'm sure you would agree with that. How serious is it? Not just that Dominic Raab is being accused by senior civil servants in his department of bullying, and that is now under investigation. But how worried are you?
Well, look, we have to have due process. I mean, he actually himself referred himself for investigation, actually, if you remember. And obviously that's ongoing at the moment. And they need to establish all of the facts. That's only fair. Bullying is unfair, but it's also only fair to give people due process as well.
Gillian Keegan, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Well, the industrial action brought disruption to towns and cities across the UK. I went out and about here in Leeds to speak to people on the picket lines.
Teachers, university lecturers, train drivers and civil servants united in determination today at a rally in Leeds. On picket lines dotted around the town, there was talk that this was a general strike in all but name.
As a historian of Labour history, welcome back to 1926.
I mean, do you think the public's really going to be on side for that if this keeps going much longer?
I mean, the thing is, we are the public, we are the workers, we are on strike. So the public is on side, clearly, because we're all striking for better conditions. We've realised what we're worth, and it's important that we keep doing it.
Around 500,000 are thought to have walked out today, some way short of the 1.5 million and more who downed tools in the only general strike in British history nearly a century ago.
But you're talking about across the public sector. It is basically a general strike, isn't it?
Well, no, it's about each union working with their members to say that if you look at the cost of living crisis, you look at the cost of inflation, and you look at the cost of life changing for people. And our members are vital to keeping this country going.
Still, the disruption has been felt across the country today, not least at the school gate.
The public mood has shifted, and that idea that there's a divide between workers who are standing up for themselves and for public sector are different from the public, from parents, has gone. Because what ordinary people realise is that they are the workers and that they're the ones suffering from the low wages and the rising prices.
At times it was as hard to glimpse the end of the march as it was to see where this industrial action ends.
Yeah, I'd like the impact to be bigger. But I also recognise that people being not being able to travel, we don't want to put anybody to any distress. But how else do you make your point?
What impact do you think today will make?
Don't know. Not enough, maybe. I wish more. I think a lot of the public maybe don't understand where we're coming from. It's not just about pay, certainly not for me. It's about everything else that's happening in schools. It's about the pressure that's put on us. It's about the amount of hours I work. It's about the fact that people think I'm paid for all my holidays and I'm not.
The strikes made life difficult for some bystanders. They took others by surprise, but there was broad sympathy.
I've just come out, actually. I didn't know it was even happening, so very ignorant of me. But yeah, good on them.
But it hasn't made much of an impact on your life then, the strikes so far?
Well, yeah, but, totally get it, and the change needs to happen, so yeah, I should be joining, but I've just got to get back to work.
I couldn't get to work this morning, so obviously because of the train strikes, it's been a little bit difficult, so...
But do you sympathise with them?
I do. Obviously everyone wants to be paid, don't they, so I do, but it does cause disruption.
All out then, whippets included. Not for the first time nor the last in what is becoming an increasingly bitter dispute with the government.
Well, earlier I spoke with Mary Bowstead, the Joint General Secretary of the National Education Union. I started by asking her when the NEU would be open to further talks with the government.
That's up to them to invite us. We can't do the timetable on talks. We left the meeting on Monday saying we really hoped that after today they would really sit down and really start to negotiate. And what will be necessary is that ministers come with a willingness to actually say that there is a way through this, which will involve giving teachers better pay.
But can you show that willingness to compromise right now to maybe the parent who's been at home all day, probably earning a lot less than the average teacher, who's had to miss a day's pay because of this disruption? Can you give them hope that you are willing to compromise too?
Listen, we're experienced negotiators. We're looking for, ways which we can solve this dispute. We would really
give us an example then. Give me an example right now of somewhere where you're going into the education department with an offer to be compromising.
OK then, so say the department carries on with the line, which we don't think is right, that there's no extra money for this year. So then what about a long-term correction in teacher pay? If the government, as it says, has to get on top of inflation this year, then what are the prospects for future years? Is there a prospect of a multi-year pay deal which restores the long-term decline in teacher pay? There are very many ways in which you can address the problem of the long-term decline in teacher pay, but you have to be serious in negotiating it.
You made two offers there. Postpone a pay rise until after inflation started to come down. Do a multi-year pay deal. Those are two offers that I hadn't heard before. Has the government heard that? Are they willing to tango on those 2 points?
I mean, I haven't made an offer there, Cathy. What I've said is that we are prepared. Let me be very clear about this. I think that was a very good try, so let me be clear. We are experienced negotiators. We have gone in and said there are many ways in which we can look to resolve this dispute. We are looking for a long-term correction in teacher pay. We do want an improved offer this year, but we're also willing to look at other ways to resolve it. And you ask me, have we mentioned this to ministers? Yes, we have. And we warned the government last July that we would ballot for action. It's really disgraceful that it's taken till January to start discussing it in any sustained way, but certainly not seriously enough.
Are you prepared to persist with this action right up till exam time then?
I think that is a that would be extremely unfortunate. I think that teachers would be extremely reluctant to take action. Did I say that? I don't think I did. I said, I'm asking you the question. Further dates. All right, then any further dates for patterns of action would have to be agreed by the executive and be doable by the membership. And myself, I don't think that action during an exam time would be something that the members would want to do or the executive would want to undertake, because we know how essential these exams are for young people's futures.
So hasn't the government then got you over a barrel because they know there's a kind of end date for these strikes?
No, they haven't got us over a barrel. Every day that teachers take strike action, the government's more worried about that than any other profession, and we know that. We know that from inside sources within government.
Mary Balster, thanks very much.